In the heart of Texas, where the sun beat down on dusty plains and the air hummed with the distant thrum of a diesel generator, stood Camp Hearn in 1943. It was a place built for order, a meticulously managed prisoner-of-war facility where every arrival, every departure, every single man was accounted for. Records were paramount, a bureaucratic fortress against chaos in a world consumed by war. Yet even within this rigid system, a perplexing event unfolded that would baffle historians for decades. 2 German soldiers, held captive, simply vanished. Before we delve into this intricate vanishing act, please take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your insights help us connect these forgotten corners of history. The men in question were Erich Kessler and Franz Gruber, 2 German Wehrmacht soldiers who, by all accounts, were transferred from Camp Hearn in November of 1943. Their names appeared on the outbound ledger, signed off by Captain Harding, the camp's commanding officer, a man known for his unwavering commitment to detailed documentation. Captain Harding's records were impeccable, his ledgers precise down to the last pencil stroke. So, how could 2 individuals, under such intense scrutiny, disappear so completely that their fate remained an impenetrable mystery for 22 long years? Imagine the scent of dry pine needles underfoot, the relentless Texas heat shimmering off corrugated iron roofs, and the constant, low murmur of hundreds of voices, a strange tapestry of German and American accents carried on the wind. This was the backdrop against which Kessler and Gruber's documented existence simply ceased. They weren't reported as escaped. There was no tragic incident. They were merely transferred, but to where? And why did no corresponding entry ever surface in the archives of any other camp? For over 2 decades, their names would linger on missing lists, a quiet ache for families back in Germany, a forgotten footnote in the vast, sprawling narrative of World War II. The question gnawed at the edges of the official story. What unseen forces could erase men from the meticulously kept records of a nation at war? And what secrets could a dusty archive hold for over 2 decades, only to surrender them in the most unexpected way, revealing a truth far stranger than any escape attempt? The official paperwork, crisp and dry, stated a transfer. Captain Harding, a man whose desk always smelled faintly of strong coffee and carbon paper, personally oversaw the outbound ledger for Camp Hearn. His signature, a precise, unhurried script, confirmed Erich Kessler and Franz Gruber were moved in November 1943. The destination, a general transfer to another facility, was standard protocol for security reasons, designed to prevent escape attempts or intelligence leaks. But the expected corresponding entry, the arrival report at the new camp, never materialized. This absence wasn't immediately flagged as suspicious. In the frenetic churn of wartime bureaucracy, delays were common. Trains ran late, documents were misfiled, and the sheer volume of personnel movements across the United States was staggering. Yet as weeks turned into months, the lack of a confirming record for Kessler and Gruber began to subtly, almost imperceptibly, ripple through the system. Lieutenant Arthur Jenkins, a junior officer at the Provost Marshal General's office in Washington, D.C., whose task was to reconcile POW rosters, first noted the discrepancy in early 1944. His office, a cavernous space filled with the incessant clatter of typewriters and the faint smell of stale tobacco, processed thousands of records daily. Jenkins, meticulously cross-referencing inbound and outbound manifests, found the void. He initiated a standard inquiry, a white form with red borders, marked POW status check, sent out to various facilities. The replies, when they came, were uniform, no record of named personnel. The paper trail, usually a sturdy chain linking every soldier, every prisoner, every movement, simply ended at Camp Hearn. The dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight through the office windows seemed to mock the futility of tracing a ghost through mountains of paper. This wasn't an escape. There was no alarm, no search party. This was a bureaucratic black hole, a quiet erasure. The silence from the supposed receiving camps was absolute, a stark contrast to the usual chatter of wartime communications. The predicament of Kessler and Gruber was not unique in the broader context of wartime disappearances. Thousands of soldiers from all sides simply vanished in the fog of war. But here, within the controlled confines of wartime prison camp, it presented a specific, unsettling anomaly. Why would two men, officially transferred, leave no trace at their supposed destination? What made their records so fragile, or perhaps so carefully dismantled? The answer, at that moment, remained buried deep within the layers of wartime secrecy. If you find yourself intrigued by these hidden histories and the untold stories that shaped our world, consider subscribing to WWW Stories. We delve deep into the archives to bring you narratives that challenge assumptions and reveal the intricate human drama behind the headlines. Lieutenant Jenkins, a man who prided himself on the integrity of the official record, refused to let the case simply close. He escalated his inquiry to Major Eleanor Vance, a seasoned intelligence analyst within the War Department, known for her sharp mind and an office perpetually smelling of strong coffee and old paper. Major Vance, reviewing Jenkins' findings in late 1944, saw more than a clerical error. The very precision of Captain Harding's initial transfer documentation, combined with the utter silence from all other facilities, suggested an intentional act. The paper wasn't lost, it was diverted. But to what end? And who possessed the authority to orchestrate such a maneuver, effectively making two men disappear from the official narrative without a trace? The official records, while extensive, offered no further clues to their immediate whereabouts or the true nature of their transfer. For their families back in war-torn Germany, Kessler and Gruber simply became names on a growing list of the missing. The hope for a letter, a sign of life, slowly dwindled with each passing year. The weight of that unanswered question, "Where are they?" became a silent burden, a small personal wound in the vast aftermath of a global conflict. The official channels, meant to provide clarity, instead provided only a dead end, leaving only a lingering question mark in the meticulously kept records of a nation at war. The crisp edges of the official forms offered no answers, only the chilling realization that some vanishing acts are not about escape, but about a deliberate, calculated erasure from within the system itself. Major Vance, leaning back in her creaking leather chair, watched the dust motes dance in the late afternoon sun filtering through her office window. The scent of her strong black coffee mingled with the dry, aged smell of countless files. She understood the implications of Jenkins' findings. This wasn't a lost form in a mountainside of paperwork. This was an absence, carefully crafted, a deliberate void in what should have been an unbroken chain of custody. The question wasn't if someone had intervened, but who and why. Her fingertips traced the crisp edge of Captain Harding's transfer order, the last tangible evidence of Kessler and Gruber's existence within the standard system. The War Department, even in its vastness, had protocols for everything. Yet Major Vance knew there were always exceptions, operations that existed in the shadows, just beyond the reach of routine audits. She recalled hushed conversations, fragments of memos hinting at specialized programs for certain prisoners of war. These weren't about interrogation in the traditional sense, but about leveraging unique knowledge or skills. Could Kessler and Gruber have been part of something like that? The very idea was unsettling, suggesting a layer of statecraft so discreet it could erase individuals from existence. Her gaze drifted to a framed photograph on her desk, a younger self standing beside a B-17. The war was a brutal, complex beast, demanding unconventional solutions. She initiated a series of discreet inquiries, not through official channels, but through her network of contacts within military intelligence. These were men and women who understood the delicate art of information gathering, the whispers behind the headlines. The replies were always the same: polite non-acknowledgement, a subtle redirection, a vague reference to national security matters that fell outside her purview. Each non-answer was a confirmation of her growing suspicion. The silence was not ignorance, it was intentional. Meanwhile, in the small towns of Germany, the post-war landscape was one of rubble and grief. Families clung to hope, sifting through lists of the dead, the wounded, the missing. Frau Kessler, Eric's mother, would visit the local church every Sunday, her fingers tracing the rough-hewn wood of the pews, praying for a sign. Her letters to the Red Cross, penned with trembling hands, always returned with the same disheartening message: status unknown. The lack of closure was a heavy cloak, a constant chill in the warmth of her home. Franz Gruber's young wife, Anna, kept his photograph on her nightstand, its sepia tones, a fading memory of a life interrupted. The war had taken so much, but the uncertainty surrounding her husband's fate was a unique torment. What truly became of a man who vanished from a prison camp, not on a battlefield, but within the secure walls of his captivity? The official records, the very bedrock of accountability, had failed them, while the Allied forces meticulously documented millions of lives, deaths, and captures. Some few cases seemed designed to defy such order. Dr. Julian Thorne, a military historian at the National Archives in Washington, D.C., decades later, would describe this period as a bureaucratic blind spot, a deliberate zone of ambiguity where the needs of national security superseded individual identities. He noted in his 1978 paper, Shadow Operations of the American Homefront, that the sheer scale of the conflict allowed for such discreet maneuvers to go largely unnoticed. The paper, bound in dark blue, held the faint smell of dust and forgotten truths. The question lingered, a persistent echo through the corridors of power and the quiet homes of families. If not escape, if not death, then what? What intricate vanishing act could be orchestrated from within the system itself, so effectively scrubbing identities that even diligent officers like Major Vance hit a wall of impenetrable silence? The answers lay hidden, not in the chaos of war, but in the calculated order of its covert operations. The official forms and ledgers, once so precise, now felt like a cruel misdirection, a carefully constructed illusion. The silence Major Vance encountered was not merely a lack of information. It was an active institutional quiet, designed to protect secrets far beyond the immediate battlefield. The war was nearing its end, but another colder conflict was already beginning to cast its long shadow. The implications of specialized knowledge, particularly scientific or technical expertise, held immense weight for the emerging geopolitical landscape. The scent of ozone from the new radar equipment being tested in distant facilities, a smell that occasionally wafted through Washington's corridors, underscored the changing nature of power. She understood that the official channels, with their forms and procedures, were merely the visible superstructure. Beneath lay a deeper architecture of statecraft, where certain individuals, deemed vital assets, could be rerouted, their identities temporarily or permanently obscured. This wasn't about malice, she reasoned, but about a ruthless pragmatism demanded by global conflict. Yet the human cost, the families left in an agonizing limbo, was a burden she felt acutely. Her inquiries, though discreet, had stirred enough dust to confirm her suspicions. Kessler and Gruber hadn't vanished by accident. They had been made to vanish. But the specifics, the exact nature of their new roles or locations, remained a perfectly locked vault. Years passed. The war ended, giving way to the monumental task of rebuilding, repatriation, and reconciliation. The official lists of missing persons, once a daily horror, slowly solidified into grim statistics. For most, closure eventually arrived, often in the form of a death notice or a joyous reunion. But for Eric Kessler and Franz Gruber, the void persisted. Their names, meticulously recorded by Captain Harding at Camp Hearn, never appeared on any subsequent roster, never crossed any official border, never returned to their families. The crisp, clean scent of fresh paper in the newly established post-war archives in Germany would often be tinged with the metallic tang of unspoken loss. Dr. Eleanor Reed, a genealogist working with the Red Cross in the late 1940s, dedicated years to tracking down missing soldiers. Her office, perpetually cluttered with maps and files, often smelled of old coffee and faint mildew. She encountered thousands of cases, each a heartbreaking puzzle. But the case of Kessler and Gruber always stood out. It was like trying to trace a river that simply vanished into the desert. She would later recount in a 1955 interview for the Frankfurt Gazette. Their paper trail ended abruptly in Texas, unlike anything I'd ever seen. No death, no escape, just nothing. It defied all logic. She spent countless hours sifting through manifests, cross-referencing names, but the result was always the same: a blank page where their continued story should have been. The sheer volume of post-war documentation, meant to bring order, paradoxically provided perfect cover for such anomalies. The persistent mystery of their disappearance became a quiet testament to the enduring power of wartime secrecy. While local Texas newspapers might have carried generic blurbs about routine POW transfers, nothing ever hinted at the specific, deliberate erasure of these two men. The records of Captain Harding, usually a beacon of clarity, became the final frustrating entry in a story that simply stopped mid-sentence. What kind of national security interest could justify such a complete and enduring silence, effectively sacrificing the identities of two individuals for decades? This was not a system failure. It was a system design. The mechanism for their vanishing was not a glitch, but a feature, a carefully constructed bureaucratic maneuver. The question wasn't just where they went, but how the apparatus of a democratic nation could so thoroughly and quietly rewrite the lives of men under its care. The very precision of the initial records, meant to ensure accountability, became a cruel misdirection, leading diligent investigators like Major Vance and Dr. Reed down a path that abruptly ended. The answer, it seemed, was buried not under rubble, but under layers of seemingly innocuous paperwork, waiting for an unexpected hand to unearth it. The mechanism for their vanishing was not a glitch, but a feature, a carefully constructed bureaucratic maneuver. The question wasn't just where they went, but how the apparatus of a democratic nation could so thoroughly and quietly rewrite the lives of men under its care. The very precision of the initial records, meant to ensure accountability, became a cruel misdirection, leading diligent investigators like Major Vance and Dr. Reed down a path that abruptly ended. The answer, it seemed, was buried not under rubble, but under layers of seemingly innocuous paperwork, waiting for an unexpected hand to unearth it. This institutional quiet was not accidental. As the smoke cleared from World War II, a new, colder shadow began to stretch across the globe. The geopolitical landscape was shifting, and with it, the value of specific knowledge. The scent of new technologies, of rocket fuel and atomic research, permeated the air in Washington's corridors, replacing the smell of gunpowder. In this nascent Cold War, certain prisoners of war, particularly those with specialized scientific, engineering, or intelligence backgrounds, became assets of immense strategic importance. The official historian of the War Department's intelligence operations, Dr. Kenneth Albright, would later write in his 1982 monograph, The Unseen Hand, that the exigencies of national security in the immediate post-war era often necessitated operations outside conventional legal frameworks, particularly concerning individuals whose expertise could tip the balance of emerging global power. It was a stark reality, demanding ruthless pragmatism. Erich Kessler, an accomplished mechanical engineer, and Franz Gruber, with his background in advanced ballistics, possessed precisely the kind of specialized knowledge that suddenly became invaluable. Their original identities, meticulously logged at Camp Hearn, were not simply lost, they were strategically overwritten. The goal wasn't just to keep them from returning to Germany, but to ensure their skills could be leveraged, shielded from both enemy intelligence and public scrutiny. This rerouting was a highly classified directive, mailed in layers of plausible deniability. The faint hum of fluorescent lights in secure, undisclosed facilities replaced the harsh Texas sun, and the clatter of typewriters was exchanged for the hushed tones of scientific collaboration. For 2 decades, the official record remained stubbornly silent. The files pertaining to Kessler and Gruber, slim as they were, gathered dust in the vast, impersonal archives. Their existence a bureaucratic ghost. The smell of aged paper and forgotten ink filled the air, a silent testament to the secrets held within. Families in Germany eventually moved on, their grief dulled by time but never fully extinguished. The names Erich Kessler and Franz Gruber became etched in local memorials as missing in action, a fate common enough in a world ravaged by war, yet profoundly unique in its true genesis. No one suspected their disappearance was not a casualty of conflict, but an active, calculated act of statecraft. It was in 1965, 22 years after their vanishing, that the first crack appeared in this carefully constructed wall of silence. The National Archives in Washington, D.C., a colossal building where the smell of old parchment and polished wood perpetually lingered, housed millions of documents. It was here that a junior archivist, Miss Helen Davies, was meticulously cross-referencing old wartime documents for an unrelated post-war repatriation project. Her desk, usually adorned with stacks of routine requests, that day held a box of misfiled papers. The task was tedious, but Miss Davies, known for her sharp eye and unwavering dedication, found satisfaction in the order of things. If the intricate layers of this story, revealing how statecraft can reshape individual lives, has given you a new perspective, please consider hitting the like button. It helps us continue to uncover these hidden histories. As Miss Davies sifted through the dusty documents, her fingers brushing against brittle paper, she stumbled upon a faded, heavily redacted telegram. Its date, November 1943, immediately caught her attention, placing it precisely within the time frame of Kessler and Gruber's disappearance from Camp Hearn. The telegram was marked "Eyes Only," a chilling designation, and its instructions were stark. Transfer 2 specific POWs under new, generic identifying numbers. The directive cited national security without further detail, effectively scrubbing their original identities from standard records. The faint, almost imperceptible scent of metallic ink on the aged paper seemed to hum with untold secrets. This wasn't merely a lost document. It was an echo from a hidden operation, finally breaking through the decades of silence. The telegram, misfiled under a stack of routine 1965 repatriation requests, bore a cryptic codename, Operation Nightingale. Miss Davies' breath hitched. She suddenly recalled a hushed conversation she'd overheard between 2 senior officials back in 1945, referencing precisely that name, describing it as a discreet intelligence-gathering effort involving certain German prisoners with specialized knowledge. The pieces clicked into place. Erich Kessler and Franz Gruber hadn't escaped, nor had they died in a tragic accident. Their vanishing was a deliberate, calculated act of statecraft, orchestrated from within the system itself. The very precision of Captain Harding's records, once a source of frustration, now confirmed the exact point of their diversion. The immediate consequence of this bureaucratic maneuver was a profound, aching silence for their families. Frau Kessler and Anna Gruber in Germany never received another letter, never knew their true fate. Their names lingered on missing lists for decades, a persistent wound in the post-war recovery. No local newspaper blurb, no official inquiry ever hinted at the specific deliberate erasure of these 2 men. Their original identities, meticulously logged at Camp Hearn, were effectively scrubbed, replaced by generic numbers, ensuring their skills could be leveraged for emerging national security interests, shielded from public and enemy scrutiny. This accidental discovery by Ms. Davies 2 decades after the war blew open a cold case, revealing that their vanishing was not an accident of war, but an act of calculated statecraft. It showed how under the immense pressures of a global conflict and the dawn of the Cold War, the apparatus of a democratic nation could, with a pen stroke and a stamp, redefine the lives of individuals deemed valuable. The paradox of their disappearance, men vanishing, from a meticulously run camp finally made sense within the context of covert operations. The cold tang of the metal filing cabinets in the archives held not just paper, but the echoes of sacrificed identities. How many other men, deemed valuable for their skills or knowledge, were similarly rerouted through America's wartime bureaucracy, their identities erased, their fates sealed by a pen stroke and a stamp? What became of them after the war? Share your thoughts on this profound aspect of wartime secrecy in the comments below. If you're curious about more untold stories from World War II and the profound impact of global events on individual lives, make sure to subscribe to WWW Stories. We're constantly unearthing these hidden narratives to bring them to light.